It was on a Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks ago from today. I went camping out in the woods and the plan was to spend the next 2 days there. For that trip, I chose a new campsite, a spot that's about roughly 4 hours from the location I normally camp at. The place was quite beautiful, nearly untouched by humans. You hardly see people there due to its remoteness. Most campers nowadays, they prefer the convenience and comfort of knowing that civilization is only a few miles from their campsite. That's actually a good thing for people like myself. I'm one of the rare ones who likes to camp in isolation from everything. I was lucky to have met a fellow camper who suggested I give this spot a try. He told me that it was beautiful and remote. I was not disappointed. I had spent most of the morning hours setting up camp, having a snack, then taking photos of the surrounding area. It was about 2:40 in the afternoon when I left the camp to go for a hike. I was heading toward the lake the fellow camper had mentioned. I was going to scope out the place so I could go fishing the next morning. So 10 minutes into the hike, traveling south from my campsite, things became a bit unsettling. I felt this strange sensation on my skin. How could I explain this? It was tingling, almost like I was walking through a zone that was electrified. It didn't hurt, but you could definitely feel that things weren't normal in that area. Now, I have no clue what radiation does to you, other than that you die if you are exposed to a high dose of it. And despite my ignorance, the first thing that I thought of was that perhaps the area was contaminated with radiation. That's how weird the tingling sensation felt on my body. 2 minutes in that zone was enough to spook the crap out of me. I turned around to go back to my campsite, and that's when the graveness of the situation hit me. You see, I had left trail marks along the way to help me get back to the camp. I was not familiar with this place, and thus I took more precautions than usual. So then what happened to the trail ribbon I had wrapped up around the tree only 2 minutes ago? I stopped walking not long after the tingling sensation. What I should have seen when I turned around was a yellow ribbon tied to a tree about 10 yards from my location, but it wasn't there. So I checked the compass to get my bearing, and holy crap, the needle was spinning like a freaking roulette table. I realized then and there I was not in a normal place. I'll be totally honest with you. I was about to poop my pants. The place scared the bejesus out of me. It took every ounce of courage in me to try to keep myself calm. In such a situation, you would think that turning around and going back the same way I came from would solve the dilemma. But that solution wasn't exactly applicable in that situation. The crazy thing is, the entire forest looked different when I turned around. I couldn't recognize anything. There was only one thing that I could do. I did a 180 just now. Logically speaking, if I take a straight path in the direction that I'm facing, it should take me to or near the campsite. Hence, that's what I did. I didn't walk for long. I may have taken 40 steps when literally everything changed. The tingling sensation was gone, the forest looked familiar again, and the ribbon, the marker ribbon, was wrapped around the tree just as I had left it. I continued walking and found more ribbons along the way. Then some 10 minutes later, I was back in my campsite. Needless to say, I packed up everything and left the place right away. As much as I love camping, there was no way in hell that I was spending the night there. So what in the actual heck happened to me? I'm not sure, but I do know one thing, and I'm so sure about this. I would bet my house, car, and even my dog that the lying piece of shite of that fellow camper has set me up to get lost in that zone. That, by the way, it leads to a far scarier question. You know, I couldn't be the first guy to have been conned by the jerk. So, just how many people do you think might be stuck in there, lost forever? This happened 15 years ago when I was 12 years old. One morning on a Saturday, Dad, Mom, and I had left home early to go visit Grandma at her place. She used to live some 3 hours drive away from our place, and that was the main reason why I didn't get to see her too often. I remember Dad used to tell Grandma to sell her house and to move in with us. Grandma would say she couldn't because of all the memories she had in that house. After all, it's the only house she's known ever since she got married to Grandpa. At that point in time, Grandpa had passed away, and their son, that being my dad, had gotten married and moved out. Dad was always concerned about Grandma being alone. But it couldn't be helped because the real reason why she couldn't move was the memory of her eldest son, my dad's older brother, who died at a tender age of 7. Grandma could never let go of him. She even kept his room in the same state as on the day of his death. That's why she lived alone in that big, empty, lonely house and refused to live with us. At any rate, we arrived at Grandma's after the long drive. I was happy to see her, but Grandma was even happier that I was there. I didn't know it at the time, but later in life, I found out that I looked very much alike my deceased uncle. I think that was the main reason why she was always so elated to see me. So that visit was supposed to last only a few hours. As far back as I can remember, we never stayed at Grandma's overnight. The drive was long and it wasn't like we saw her often. But for some reason, Dad always insisted for us to leave on the same day. Dad didn't get to have his way on that day, however. We had lunch with Grandma, Dad helped out with some repairs around the house. Then we were going to leave, but the car wouldn't start. Dad had it towed to the local repair shop and was told that the parts needed would arrive on the next day. We had no choice but to sleep over at Grandma's. I went to bed at around 9 p.m. but couldn't fall asleep for many hours. Part of the reason was due to the noise Dad was making, pacing back and forth out in the hallway. He did that for like an hour and even came into my room a couple of times. That didn't help, but the sleeplessness, I think it was mainly due to the unfamiliarity. I was still wide awake at midnight, and the house was that quiet by then. I got up to go to the bathroom and walked out into the hallway. I only had to walk a few meters to get to the bathroom, but I was hesitant to continue walking because I had to go past the room that my dad and uncle used to occupy. Eventually though, my bladders were about to explode and I ran into the bathroom to do my business. I went back out into the hallway after peeing and nearly died of a heart attack. I couldn't believe my eyes, but I was seeing my young uncle standing right in front of me. In that moment, I wanted to scream for help or run into the room Mom and Dad were sleeping in. But the issue was I was in such shock that my body was literally frozen. I kid you not, I couldn't will my body to do what I wanted it to do. I stood there as my uncle, I guess you could say, did circles around me like he was floating in the air. I closed my eyes and didn't move a muscle. Then suddenly, I felt a cold sensation at the back of my neck, and that let me know he was behind me. A second later, I felt something scratch my neck. It hurt a lot, but I tried my best to not react to the pain. I don't know how long I was standing in the hallway, but it must have been a while because when I opened my eyes, my vision was so blurry from keeping my eyes shut so tightly for such a long time. I ran into Mom and Dad's room and began crying as soon as I saw them. I told them of everything and begged them to let me sleep with them. Mom, I knew she would say yes. But Dad, I fully expected for him to be mad at me for acting like a baby, but he actually hugged me and told me to stop crying, that he would let me sleep with him and Mom. My dad is one tough dude and they raised me to be just like him. Crying because I fell or getting scared of the dark, those things were not tolerated by my father. So why? What was so special about me getting scared of some supposed ghost? Well, I'll tell you why. My father knew that something resembling his dead brother resided in that house. That's the reason why we never stayed there overnight, and not to mention we went there only a couple of times a year. There were good reasons for that. After we got back home, Dad showed me the scars at the back of his neck. It was nothing new. I've always known he had those scars. However, as it turns out, he hadn't exactly told me the truth about how he got them. I think you might have caught on by now. I got the same scar that my dad had, only he had so many on top of another and so on, that it was impossible to count the number of times he must have been scratched by the being that resembled my uncle. We never went to Grandma's after that. I mean, we'd go there, but we'd never enter the house. Instead, we would have lunch with Grandma at a local restaurant, go to the park if the weather was fair, and then we'd drop her off at her house and say goodbye. Grandma passed away 5 years ago. My dad inherited the house, but I knew he wanted nothing to do with that. I remember going there with him to pick up some valuables, which by the way were sold promptly after the pickup. Dad didn't really care about the price he was getting. As long as he was getting paid something for each item, he was more than happy to part with them. In the end, Dad pretty much threw out everything that was inside Grandma's house. I thought he would sell the house after it was emptied out, but I was wrong. He actually demolished that and sold the land to a local developer. I recently had lunch with him and took the opportunity to ask him why he had demolished the house. He said these words: "Your grandpa built that house to last 1,000 years. It was designed beautifully and built with impeccable craftsmanship. We would have been paid a lot more money had we sold the house plus the land. But how in good conscience was I going to sell a house that was cursed? What if a young couple became the new owners and their children had to go through the same horror I went through as a child? I wouldn't put anyone through that, let alone a child. That's why I demolished the house, to hopefully end the curse once and for all." I gotta say, I was very touched by those words. I have so much respect and love for my old man. And yeah, that was my one and only experience with a ghost or spirit or whatever that being was at Grandma's. To be frank, I still have nightmares about that night every once in a while. I think it's the scar that reminds me of it. I still feel it at the back of my neck, and this sends shivers down my spine every time I touch it. Don't get me wrong, I function normally like everyone else. I go to work, have friends, and I'm in a relationship with a beautiful girlfriend. But some things that happen in life stay with you forever. It's just the way our brains are wired. All I can do is to fight against the anxiety every time it comes back. Thankfully, my dad had raised me to be strong both body and mind. As long as the being that resembles my uncle doesn't come back, I think I'll be fine. Yeah, I'll be just fine.